of golden light issues forth these qualities that we admire: love, compassion, and so forth. And actually, everyone can begin, if they wish, with invoking this radiant image of golden light. Because if we do invoke a specific figure, such as Shakyamuni Buddha, for example, or one of our gurus, we can visualize those figures as residing in the center of that sphere of golden light. In fact, that sphere of golden light is their radiance itself. So this gives us something to focus our attention on and remind us of what is important and significant in our life. And once such a relationship has been established, then we can begin this session, whatever it is that's going to follow. We can begin by, especially in this case, we're doing practices of purification. We can then bring to mind the kinds of things that we feel our life would be so much better, so much more beneficial, if we could cleanse our life of certain disturbing influences. So if you notice in yourself a tendency to lose your temper, to get angry, to have uncontrollable desires and addictions, if you feel the mind is cloudy and hard to focus, hard to gain understanding, then you can recognize that these coverings, whether it's of hatred or attachment or dullness, whatever it might be, are obscuring a deeper, purer nature of your consciousness. And so recognizing their detrimental effects, how they prevent you from being the person that you want to be, then you develop a mind, an attitude of regret for whatever has created such coverings, such defilements or delusions, or klesha, as they are known in Sanskrit. And then, so that gives us an idea of why we're doing the practice, that there is something that we feel we want to cleanse, that we want to peel away so that we can get in contact with the deeper essence of our being, from which all good qualities, primarily loving kindness, compassion, and wisdom, skillful means, and so forth, from which all of these good qualities come forth. So, having evoked, at least to some extent, the first opponent power of regret, we move to the second power of reliance. And based on whatever initial visualization that we've done of our source of inspiration, we've already begun to invoke the power of reliance, because whatever figure it is that we're thinking about, again, whether it's Shakyamuni Buddha or whomever, we're focusing on such a figure because we take refuge. In other words, we feel that this figure, by dint of his or her qualities, has the ability to help lead us out of thraldom to these defilements and towards an experience of our true, deeper nature. So, as for the the second opponent power of reliance, we've begun to invoke the first one of refuge, and then we bring to mind that whatever negative or harmful actions we may have committed, uh, it will be in relationship to the beings with whom we share this planet, for whom we're trying to cultivate the wish that we can benefit them in innumerable ways, leading them to more happiness in this lifetime, happiness in the future lifetime, liberation from the cycle of unsatisfactory existence, and all the way up to full enlightenment. Or however it is that we imagine the ultimate aim of our practice. So this brings us to the cultivation of the second aspect of reliance, that is the Bojichita motivation, the wish to attain enlightenment for the sake of benefiting all beings. So now, at this point, as a way of invoking this power of reliance, we will be reciting the we'll be reciting the stanza, which contains in it refuge and bodhicitta, and then followed by an offering, a symbolic mandala offering to the sources of our refuge, to be able to actualize the path, remove all the difficulties and obscurations that prevent our experience of awakening, and be able to thereby to achieve the purposes not only of ourselves but all others. So this invocation of refuge and Bojichita, followed by the mandala offering, will now be led from your side.
Thank you, Jon. We'll be chanting, and please feel free to chant along. And thank you, Sheila, for sharing. Perhaps for the refuge and generating Bojichita, we can do it twice in English and then one time in Tibetan for those who know the two. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sorry, I have the karma to have a very dry throat right now. One moment, please. Okay. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chognam la jangchu badu dakni kyapsu chi dagi chonyengi pesonam ki jola penche sangye ju pasho. And then the mandala offering. And for those who know the tune in Tibetan, please feel free to go ahead. We use a particular tune. And if not, then maybe just focus on the beautiful visualization, everything that evokes joy, offering it to this beautiful energy. Sajiboki Jukshin medom Tramri rahablingji Ni degen badi Sangye shindu Ming te wai Jokun nam dang jing lang Joba shom. And then we offer it if we scroll down a bit, Sheila. And we'll do the Idam Guru together. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami.
Okay. Thank you for Shiva and Jennifer for facilitating that. So now we're continuing on with the practice of purification. Remember, we did the initial visualization in whichever fashion you like. Then we've invoked, at least briefly, the power of regret. And we've gotten into the power of reliance, of taking refuge and generating the compassionate wish of Bojichita. Mm-hmm. So what follows after that in his practice, whenever, certainly in the tradition of the lamas with whom I've studied, whenever we are invoking the bodhicitta wish to attain enlightenment for the sake of others, we cultivate this compassionate, we enhance this compassionate motivation by bringing to mind this so-called four immeasurables of equanimity, love, compassion, and joy. So I'll simply read these so that you can bring it back to our mind, what these qualities mean. But when we're doing this practice by ourselves or for a longer time in a group, it's really worth spending quite a lot of time getting into mentally what each of these four mean and to try to generate them in our heart. So for example, the first line in the version that I provided is, may all sentient beings be free from the bias of attachment and aversion. And when we think about it, nearly all of the difficulties that are emblematic of what has happened to so much of the world's population in 2020 is that the beings living there, all of us, instead of being harmonious, instead of us recognizing our common humanity, are divided, being feeling attachment to some and aversion to others. So do you think what the world might be like if we could let go of this biased attachment and this aversion, which leads to anger and hatred? If we could let go of that and recognize all of us as members of one family, all of us who wish to be happy, experience fulfillment and purpose and meaning for our life, and we could actually recognize and feel our shared humanity, think of how many of the problems that plague the world today would automatically disappear. So even if we're just reading or thinking about one line, like may all sentient beings be free from the bias of attachment and aversion, it only takes a second to read those words, but it's sometimes worth it to spend quite a bit of time cultivating that feeling of indeed how wonderful it would be if this fellow feeling could pervade all the beings on this planet, and the hostility that comes from aversion, anger, hatred, uh, possessiveness to one's own, dislike of the other, if all of those could disappear, and we can generate that feeling strongly in our mind as a wish. And then we can do the same thing for the three immeasurables that follow. Immeasurable loving kindness, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. And immeasurable compassion, may all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And finally, limitless joy, may all sentient beings find fortunate rebirths and complete liberation. Now, depending on your particular philosophical view or the spiritual tradition you follow, you might want to alter one of these to make it appropriate to your worldview. But certainly there's a way of invoking these strong, deep wishes, and that itself will enhance our compassionate motivation of bodhicitta. Okay, so now we're up to the main concern for today's session, and that is to invoke the power of the remedy. In other words, if problems were created because we engaged in actions which were harmful, either through what we did or said, or even our mental attitude itself, and if we recognize that engaging in actions under the influence of such greed, hatred, closed-mindedness, jealousy, arrogance, and so forth, lead only to problems, not only for the people that we encounter, but for ourselves, that there's a retribution, not such a good word, there's a consequence to whatever negative actions we engage in, that in the future we ourselves will have to experience if we cannot purify them. So the remedy is the purification of whatever negativity we may have engaged in. So again, if you have something specific in mind that you wish to purify, maybe a long-standing habit that you'd like to get over, we can gradually do that by focusing on that habit and then come up with a remedy, either one provided in a practice like this or another specific remedy, such as the one that I mentioned that Gandhi came up with to help someone avoid the karmic consequences of having committed murder during communal violence in India. Anyway, whatever the appropriate remedy is, then we can apply it as a way of cleansing ourselves of having to experience the harmful consequences, the suffering consequences of our harmful actions. So this is then becomes the major portion of this section of the practice. And as I said, there are many, many different remedies that can be employed, but for the sake of this weekend course, we're going to focus on a practice invoking the radiance that comes from the pure body, speech, and mind of those beings who have awoken to their true nature, the enlightened beings. So, just to read through briefly uh, what the elaborate evocation of the remedy might be using these qualities of pure body, speech, and mind. We read, at the Guru Buddha's crown, in other words, at the head or at the center of whatever source of inspiration we've invoked in front of us, there is a white Om, and at the throat, a red Ah, and at the heart, a blue Hum. So Om, Ah, and Hum, in this case, are what is known as the seed syllables of body, speech, and mind. And the Om is visualized in the crown or head chakra, the red Ah at the throat, and the blue Hum at the heart center of these enlightened beings. And these three represent all enlightened beings, perfectly pure body, speech, and mind. And now, during the practice, we're going to be reciting a particular mantra associated with Guru Shakyamuni Buddha, and we're going to recite that mantra in groups, and a series of repetitions, sometimes slowly and then sometimes more rapidly together. And in the first set of recitations, we visualize that a purifying stream of white light flows from the Guru Buddha's crown and enters our own crown, cleansing us of all the negativities accumulated through harmful actions of the body. Okay. Now, of course, it just takes a few seconds to read a sentence like that, but it takes a longer period of time to really get the feeling that there is some kind of transference of energy taking place, that we're focusing in on the enlightened qualities of our source of inspiration, on the holy body of Guru Shakyamuni Buddha, for example, or our own teacher. And then we're invoking that pure energy to radiate forth from the crown of that figure and entering into our crown. And slowly, as we recite the mantra, we allow ourselves to feel this cleansing quality to take place. Now, if you come from this similar kind of background to myself, you might feel that all of this is just make-believe. You know, it has no correspondence to reality. But if we just allow ourselves to open up and reflect on what we're actually doing, you know, we're opening up to a positive, expansive, radiant energy that actually exists in this universe. It's not something we're just imagining, it's not just make-believe. So if we can relax our skepticism, at least for a little while, and do the practice and really feel that we're receiving this inspiration, in this case, the inspiration that arises from the pure physical manifestation of energy, and that it sweeps into us and cleanses our own crown chakra, the symbolic center of our physical body, cleansing it of any impurities. So, for example, if we're currently experiencing some kind of illness or other physical disability, just feel that we're pulling that positive energy into our body and cleansing of those defilements, slowly enabling them to dissolve, to be washed away, and, and to be clear. And then we do a similar activity, purifying our verbal actions by invoking a red, vibrant energy into our throat chakra, um, cleansing us of all negativities accumulated through harmful actions of speech. So if we're someone who habitually speaks harsh language or untruths, or doesn't have the power of speech, whose speech tends to be meaningless, or if we habitually engage in divisive speech, anything that we may say through this door of our speech that is harmful, that is not beneficial, then the red light coming from the enlightened beings, pure verbal center, comes into our throat and purifies us of these defilements. And again, as we recite the mantra, we feel that this is happening gradually over a period of time. It's not as if one recitation of one mantra zaps us and we're completely pure forever. No, it took a while to build up these negativities, so it will take a while to cleanse ourselves of them. But this is something that we can start and begin experiencing some beneficial effect from right away. And then in a similar fashion, when it comes to the negativities of mind, and in fact, any and all negativities that we might engage in, whether they're manifested primarily physically, the actions that we do with our body, or verbally, the actions we do with our speech, all of them are based on mistakes being made in our view of reality. Mistakes being made because our mind is covered with the various delusions of ignorance, greed, and so forth. And so when it comes time to purifying these mental and emotional habits that we've discovered in ourselves that are very problematic, then during the third set of mantra recitation, we visualize or feel or just experience that a stream of purifying blue light flows from the heart center of the Guru Buddha in front of us, enters our own heart, and cleanses us of all negativities accumulated through the harmful actions of the mind. So this way of dividing the practice into three parts, focusing on three different centers of the source of inspiration in front of us, is somewhat more elaborate way of doing the practice. But simply, if we're just visualizing, instead of a figure in front of us, just simply a radiant sphere of light, then when we recite the mantra, we just visualize that first the white, then the red, and finally the blue light flows from the center of that sphere of golden light that we're invoking in front of us, and enters in turn our own crown, throat, and heart center, cleansing us of all defilements of body, speech, and mind. There are more elaborate instructions that could be added to this basic practice, but if we have time, I'll offer that later. But now I'd like to get into what it is that we're reciting while we're invoking these powers of the pure body, speech, and mind of enlightened beings. And that is the mantra. So the mantra that we're reciting is Guru Shakyamuni Buddha's mantra. This was the mantra that I first heard Lama Yeshe recite on my first trip to India, and which had such a powerful effect. I'm going to just recite it now, more or less syllable by syllable, 3 times. And it would be helpful if you, from your side, just repeated whatever syllables I recite after me. And this is kind of establishing a connection with this mantra, if you don't have one already. So it begins, Tayata, Om, Muni, Muni, Maha Munaya, Swaha. Second time, Tayata, Om, Muni, Muni, Maha Munaya, Swaha. And the last time, Tayata, Om, Muni, Muni, Maha Munaya, Swaha. And if we're reciting this mantra out loud, individually or in a group, one tune that we could use for this recitation would be as follows. Tayanta, Om Mune Mune, Maha Munaya Swaha. Tayanta, Om Mune Mune, Maha Munaya Swaha. Antayanta, Om Mune Mune, Maha Munaya Swaha. And then in our practice, when it comes time for us to recite many more mantras at a faster pace, then if we wish, we can leave off the Tayata and simply recite Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Yasoha, 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 Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Yasoha. So the question always comes up in people's mind, well, what does the mantra mean? And actually, mantras don't primarily have a literal meaning. The meaning of the mantra is the energy that they invoke. Okay? But having said that, there is a way of understanding what the different syllables of this mantra refers to. Okay? So the beginning, the Tayata, is just an introduction. It's simply, it is like this. That's all Tayata means. It is like this. It's like when an entertainer comes on stage and is about is being introduced. He's about to come on stage, and the master of ceremony introduces him or her. You might say something, and now here's the star of our show. Let's have a big round of applause for our first performer, like this. So it's just an introduction. It's just introducing us. So this is introducing us to the mantra that embodies and presents its spirit of enlightenment, the qualities of enlightenment. It is like this. And then the mantra itself begins with the syllable Om, which does not have a literal translation. You can't look it up in a dictionary and it says Om, it means something in particular, but its syllable embodies the body, speech, and mind of all enlightened beings. And it also relates to our own present body, speech, and mind in its imperfect state, with the idea that through the practice, our limited body, speech, and mind can become like the holy body, speech, and mind of our source of inspiration. So Om refers to that. Then we'll see in the main body of the mantra, there are 3 repetitions of the syllable Muni. Muni, Muni, Maha Munaya. Muni, Muni, Maha Munaya. Okay. It's not uncommon in different mantras for whatever the key word is to be recited 3 times. For example, I'm sure there are people here who are familiar with the mantra of the great female Buddha, Tara. And in her mantra, different versions of her name, Tara, are recited 3 times. So that mantra is Om Tare, Tu Tare, Ture Soha. So each of those 3s, Tare, Tu Tare, Turi, are just 3 different versions of her name, Tara. So it's invoked 3 times. So here, similarly, Muni is invoked 3 times. Muni, Muni, and then Maha Muni. Maha means great. So what does Muni signify? Well, I've been told that the Sanskrit term Muni carries the idea of ability, or the able one, the one who can accomplish. So you could think it means the able one, or the ability, then again the ability, and then the great ability. And this term, Muni, is most commonly recognized as a part of Buddha's own epithet. Buddha was known by many different names, the Blessed One, Gautama, and so forth. But one of the most common ways of referring to Shakyamuni was exactly that, Shakyamuni. So Shakya was the clan that he belonged to, and that if you go to Nepal, even nowadays, there are people who are identified as members of the Shakya clan. That clan has been in existence for well over 2,000 years. So he was the sage, or the able one, of the Shakya clan. So he was the Shakya Muni, right? So now we're invoking the ability, the strength, the power that the Buddha manifested by invoking that title, the Muni, the able one, or the ability that allowed Shakyamuni to be so beneficial to the people that he was interacting with. And is the reason why he was so admired and followed. So Muni is recited 3 times. And one of the explanations for this is that when one follows the spiritual path from the beginning, in which we take interest in solving whatever temporary or ultimate problems there might be in our life, all the way through to the end, to the attainment of full enlightenment, the manifestation of our own Buddha nature, that path can be understood as comprising 3 levels of motivation. So the first level of motivation is represented by the first Muni. And on that level, we recognize that there is suffering in our life and dissatisfaction. And we also recognize that that's being caused by the defilements of greed, hatred, ignorance, and so forth, that are covering the pure nature of our mind. And so if nothing is done to purify these coverings and remove it, then inevitably it will lead to problems and suffering and dissatisfaction, both now and in the future. And so wishing to avoid those kinds of difficulties in the rest of this life or whatever future life we may have, we invoke the first Muni, which mainly involves taking refuge in a valid source of refuge, and then placing a guard on our actions of body, speech, and mind. Consciously trying to refrain from actions which give harm through everything from murder, lying, divisive speech, all of the different ways in which we can use our body, speech, and mind to create suffering for others and inevitably suffering for oneself. So the first Muni is invoking the ability to save ourselves from having to experience the harmful effects of those actions in the future. But from a point of view of the entire path to enlightenment, even if we were to avoid the worst experiences of suffering in the future, if we haven't eradicated the seeds that lead to those experiences, if we haven't eradicated the very delusions themselves, then inevitably uh, those causes will lead to further harmful actions in the future and subsequent suffering. So the second Muni is invoked when we recognize it's not enough just to refrain from negative actions now and thinking that that's going to uh, prevent us from having to experience difficulties in the future. We actually have to eradicate the source from which they come, the delusions of greed, hatreds, and particularly of the ignorant misunderstanding of the nature of reality. Uh, if we do that, if we can actually eradicate those seeds from the root, then we experience what's known as liberation or nirvana, a state beyond suffering. So on the second level of motivation, where that second Muni is referring to, we're invoking this ability to achieve this personal liberation from suffering. But even that is considered not enough for using our full human potential to make this life as meaningful and beneficial as possible. That beyond simply nirvana, our own personal liberation, is an even higher, deeper state of awareness, often called enlightenment or Bodhi or Buddhahood, or by any other name, is representing a complete purification of not only these causes of suffering, the delusions, but even the instincts that lead them to reoccur and cloud our ability to perceive reality correctly. So in order to remove even these subtler stains on our consciousness, these subtler coverings, then it's necessary, in addition to cultivating the wisdom that sees the true nature of reality, also to cultivate what we've already been talking about, this deep wish to serve others as if they were ourselves, to overcome the attitude in which we cherish only ourselves and put everyone else into second place, but to reverse that and realize that the true purpose of our life is in fact to be as beneficial to others and create and generate an attitude which takes as much joy and much interest in working for the benefit of others as we now take in working for our own benefit alone. So this altruistic mind of enlightenment, when that's cultivated, that becomes the ability of the third Muni, the Muni that allows us to achieve not only the immediate aims of ourselves, but the benefit of all beings, full enlightenment. And so we have uh, the ability on the first level of motivation, Muni, the ability that we gain on the second level of motivation, Muni, and then the great ability, Mahamuni, developed through all three of those levels together. Muni, Muni, Mahamunaya, and then Soha. Soha is a term that often comes in the end of the mantra. And again, it doesn't have, as far as I'm aware, a specific literal meaning, but it can be translated as so be it. So the beginning part of the mantra up until the end evokes something that we wish to develop, and the Soha is like a seal. May that happen, so be it. Or another related way of understanding Soha at the end is all of the realizations that are embodied in the earlier part of the mantra, Taya Ta O Muni Muni Mahamunaya, may all of those take root in my mind. And so Soha conveys the idea of all of this actually taking root, of not just being something we say or think about, but actually something that becomes part and parcel of our consciousness itself. Taya Ta O Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. And then after the explanation of that mantra, there is a brief paragraph which says, as the flow of cleansing light into you continues, allow yourself to feel you are gradually becoming lighter, less solid, more transparent, thereby revealing your fundamental purity. So it's a little bit like when you have dirty clothes that you take to the laundry. During the first wash and rinsing of it, some of the grosser dirt comes out, but in repeated washings, then even the finer impediments are removed, the blemishes and stains. So as you do this mantra and repeating it and getting into it deeper and deeper, the feeling of being purified, then gradually we can get the sense that our heaviness, our solidity is also dissolving. Anything that hems us in, that keeps us trapped, is dissolving, being washed away. Any sense of being opaque in body or mind is being replaced with a kind of the transparency. And through this process, a certain sense of fundamental purity is glimpsed. And then whenever the recitation of the mantras finish, then at the end, we dwell silently for just a few moments within the resulting experience of calm spaciousness that such a practice can produce. All right? So, let's see. So we have 20, just under 20 minutes to do a version of this practice. If we were all in a room together, we could do this all together, but we're only together on Zoom. So the full effect of us reciting this mantra together is lost a little bit, but we still can do it to some extent. And the problem with Zoom, though, is you take the mutes off of everybody, it produces a cacophony, and hence becomes hard to hear. So instead, I think I'll limit myself so that I'll do the recitation out loud myself, but you, with your microphone muted, I would very strongly suggest that as you get into the rhythm of this practice, that you do it together with me. So what we'll do is we'll start by reciting that mantra together using the slower rhythm, and we'll do that 7 times. Then at the conclusion of that, Then I will recite the mantra without the tayata, the shorter version of the mantra, and I'll be reciting it at a faster speech or at different tones, whatever feels appropriate, and you can do the same. You need not follow the leader on this, but whatever arises spontaneously as you're reciting the mantra, you can recite it that way, at whatever speed or elevation you wish. And then after a mala, that is like 100 recitations of that mantra at this quicker speed, then I'll recite the slower mantra 3 times, as we did in the beginning. And that will mark the end of the first recitation, during which the mantra that we're reciting is carrying in sound the same purifying energy that the visualization of the white light purifying body from the crown of Shakyamuni Buddha to our crown is purifying defilements of body. Okay. So then after that, we pause for just a moment, and then we do a second round of recitations. So once again, during this one, the light that we visualize is red. It comes from the throat of the enlightened being, or the source of inspiration in front of us, and feel it as much as you can, actually coming into your own throat and purifying whatever impurities may be there. And we recite the mantra again slowly. This time, this time we'll do it again slowly 7 times, and then 100 times, a bit more rapidly, and then 3 more slow repetitions to conclude that second cycle. And then we focus on purifying blue light coming from the heart of our source of inspiration into our own heart. And here feel that our heart is being completely unburdened by any of its heaviness. And all of that is being replaced by the purity of enlightened beings, loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, and the spontaneous ability to help others. And then we'll do that third set of recitations as before, and then we'll bring that recitation to a close with a few concluding remarks. Okay? So once again, the mantra, just to say it once slowly, Taya Ta Om Muni Muni Maha Munaya Soha. So refresh one's visualization or the sense of being in the presence of a radiant sphere of light, in which is the source of our inspiration in whatever form is meaningful to us. And that we're actually in the presence of a living being who embodies these qualities that we admire and we should develop ourselves. And we're doing it so that we can purify ourselves of all limitation and thereby be in a better position to make this life meaningful for ourselves and for others. So with those thoughts behind us, we can begin the practice with the first set of purification with the white light energy. Tayata Om Mune Mune Ma Munaya Soha. Tayata Om Mune Mune Ma Munaya Soha. Tayata Om Mune Mahamunaya Soha Antayanta Om Mune Mune Mahamunaya Soha Antayanta Om Mune Mune Mahamunaya Soha Antayanta Om Mune Mune Mahamunaya Soha. And as these rays of white light continue to flow into us, we recite the mantra at a more rapid pace. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Mahamuni Yaso, Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Om Muni Muni Mahamuni, Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso. Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Muni Muni Mahamuni. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Muni Muni Mahamuni. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni, Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Muni Muni Mahamuni. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso, Muni Muni. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yaso. Tayanta Om Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. Now we focus on the red light coming from the throat center of our source of inspiration, feeling it enter into our own throat, purifying any defilements of speech. Tayanta Om Mune Mune Mahamunaya Soha Antayanta Om Mune Mune Mahamunaya Soha Antayanta Om Mune Mune Mahamunaya Soha Ayanta Om Mune Mune Mahamunaya Soha Antayanta Om Mune Mune Mahamunaya Soha. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni 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 Om Muni Muni Om Muni Muni Mahamuni 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 Om Muni Muni Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Tayanta Om Mune Mune Mamunaya Soha. And now for the third set, blue light from the heart of our source of inspiration radiates out, enters our own heart, and obliterates, evaporates, cleanses away all the defilements of our mental and emotional being, of our mind itself. Tayanta Om Mune Mune Mamunaya Soha. 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 Tayanta Om Mune Mune Soha. Om Mune Mune Mamunaya Soha. Om Mune Mune Mamunaya Soha. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni is 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 Om Muni Muni Oh, Muni Muni Mahmuni is 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 oh. Tayanta Oh, Muni Muni Mahmunaya Swaha. Now dwell silently for just a few moments within whatever experience of calm spaciousness resulted from this practice. And then we can bring this version of the practice to an end by making the heartfelt resolution to refrain from committing the same harmful actions that you just purified ever again, or at least for the following year, month, week, day, or hour. And with that, we can bring that version of the practice to a close for now. And in the remaining 20 minutes we have of this morning's session, if you have any questions or things you'd like to bring up, we can entertain them now. Ruth.
Hi, thank you so much. Silly question. It's kind of a goofy question, but you can hear me, right? Yeah.
Yeah, fine.
You know, I kind of fantasize, I think is the word. You know, when we visualize light, and for me, I feel that energy is a true energy. And, you know, I imagine us, you know, people in New York, I'm in England, you've got people spread throughout the United States, you're in California, I believe. And I don't know, I just kind of imagine the light going around the world and, you know, touching people. And then there's other people in between that are praying as we are saying the mantras and, you know, praying for that energy to have results.
Yeah.
I mean, that's possible, isn't it?
Well, it is. It is definitely possible. In the fact that we're thinking that way means that we are making a connection with all the beings in the world. Some of them may be sensitive enough to actually feel it, but even those who don't feel it, they're part of our mandala. They're part of the universe we live in. And if we are invoking those thoughts, those prayers in our mind, it's having an effect.
Yeah.
And how well it can be measured externally, I don't know, but I do had, sorry, my English is giving way. I did have an experience myself many, many years ago when I was leading a course in southern Germany, in Bavaria. And I have to tell you that my background is not only non-religious, it was anti-religious. So things like praying and those things, you know, I was brought up thinking all of that was complete mumbo jumbo, completely ridiculous, right? Things started to change slowly when I got into Buddhism, but it took a long time for it to change. But one of the things that helped me change my limited view about the efficacy of things like prayer and so forth was what happened in Bavaria. The course was given at this beautiful, well, in Switzerland, they would call it a chalet. I don't know what they call it in Bavaria, but this beautiful building in a kind of, sort of like in a ski resort, very like you would imagine on a postcard from Bavaria, very, very beautiful place. And the course was being put on by this couple. The wife's name was Eva. And in another room, from where the course was taking place, another room in this chalet was the grandmother, Ava's grandmother, very, very old, very, very frail woman, which we didn't see her very often. And so there was a session that we did together in which we were reciting actually the mantra of Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion, Om Mani Padme Hum, and sending out, you know, purifying white light of compassion. And Ava had mentioned that her grandmother had been feeling kind of ill that day. So when we did the practice, I asked that everybody think particularly of sending these waves of compassion, these prayers, to the grandmother. So we did that, and just reciting that mantra together in a group in this beautiful environment was very, very transforming for us. But what was truly amazing for me was after it was over and after we had a lunch break and after we came back for the next session, Ava reported that during the break, she had met with her grandmother, and the grandmother, who was, as I said, in another room where she couldn't hear what was going on in our meditation section, she reported that during that period of time, she felt these extraordinary rays of white, compassionate light sweeping into her. And
Oh.
there's no way she could have heard it.
Oh.
It was impossible. There was no way she could have heard it.
Hmm.
There was no way she was informed what we were doing. And yet she reported that she received it,
Oh.
that she felt it,
Hmm. That's
And
beautiful.
that was a very extraordinary experience for me,
Yeah.
because I was kind of like the Grinch at Christmas when it came to prayers, and this gave me a sense that there might be something more to it than that. So I think, yes, it's definitely possible. If you had asked me that question 45 years ago, I would have given it a much more much more pessimistic answer.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruth. Any other questions or comments? Susie. You have to unmute.
I was just saying, I see Alex has
There you go.
hand raised, and then Sue seems to have a question.
Yeah, Sue does.
I just wanted to make a comment that your stories are very helpful. They've always been helpful. I found analogies and visual pictures and stories, at least for me, extremely helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. Yeah. Anything else? Yes, Alex.
Hi. Well, first I would like to echo the idea that the stories are incredibly helpful. They stick with me. Unfortunately, they stick with me longer than some of the other words that are spoken. So thank you for the stories.
Oh, you're very welcome. In fact, one main teacher that I had, the one who I received the vast majority of my actual Dharma instruction, nearly 100% of it during the first 3 years I was a student, some of you may have heard of, some of you may have met, Geshe Gawan Darge. He would give these teachings. And what stuck with me and for most everyone else afterwards was not just the teachings he gave, which were extraordinarily clear and comprehensive, but the stories that he would tell. And no one enjoyed his stories more than he himself. So over the years, I heard him say the same stories many, many times. And each time he said them, most of them were very, very funny. So by the end of the story, he would be rolling with laughter at his own story, almost falling off the teaching throne with them. And you're right. You're absolutely right. I can forget or find it impossible to bring to mind clearly the content of a certain teaching, but the stories themselves stay for a long, long time. So it's, if there's any value in that, it's the inspiration of Geshe Gawan Darge. Wonderful, wonderful teacher.
And then I do have a question as well.
By
I'm
the way, who's
curious.
speaking? Because I can't see it on my screen.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have my video turned off.
Yeah, but who are you?
Oh, it's Alec.
Alec. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes. So can you say a little bit about the slow recitation, the 100 really fast, and so kind of just some thoughts around that.
Well, other than that one is slow and the other is fast, I'm not sure what the question is.
Yes. I guess my question is kind of why. I know for myself, I benefit much more from the slower. And then
Right.
the fast ones are just like, oh, well, then I get to count them all up, but it doesn't really help me. So
I see.
personally,
Okay.
but I didn't know if there was
I
something
understand.
else behind that practice.
Well, certainly for most people, doing something slow and getting the chance to get into it and relating to the vibration of the mantra is very, very powerful. And that's absolutely right. But many people, when they do a practice, they have, as a result of receiving that practice, they've received a certain commitment from the teacher who gave them the mantra in the first place to recite a certain number of mantras within a, let's say, within a given period of time, right? And so those numbers could be 100. It could be very simple. It could be very simple, like just do 7 a day, or 21 a day, or 100 a day. But very often the commitment is much more than that. You know, doing 1,000 a day, 10,000, or over a period of time, doing 100,000, like that. So if you were to recite the mantra that slowly each time, you'd be doing nothing but the mantra, and it would be forever before you'd finish it. So there's a certain power in making a commitment to do a practice and then actually committing it and then completing it. So in that case, then you have to move into a faster uh, uh, recitation, or else you'd never finish it. And what most people experience is that once they've tuned in to the vibration of the mantra and really setting a grounding in it by reciting it at least a few times slowly, then even when they do it more quickly, it can embody, it can carry along that same energy. In the beginning, when you're just, the mantra is new and you're just kind of rushing through it, it may seem superficial, but once you get into a practice like that, then even the rapid recitations, you're not trying to race or beat anyone else, but you just want to complete your commitment and do those mantras. They can be very, very effective. There is a mantra, there is a movie on YouTube in which the Dalai Lama is transmitting the mantra that I mentioned before, the mantra of compassion, Om Mani Padme Hum, to a group of people. So in the beginning, he recites it slowly 3 times, and the audience recites it after him, that's like the official transmission of the mantra. And then over the next about a minute and a half, then he recites a whole mala. A mala means like 100 of these mantras. You can hear him and the audience reciting it at their different various speeds until he reaches the end, and then he recites it one more time at a slower speed. I don't have the connection in front of me to that YouTube video, but I can get it for you before this afternoon, after the break. I can get it to you so you can see it after the break. And so if you'd like to see and experience the Dalai Lama transmitting that mantra of Om Mani Padme Hum and see how he does it slowly and then more rapidly, you can get a very strong sense of how this practice is done by a professional, not like somebody who comes from New Jersey. Let's see, where are we? We have 6 minutes left. Alex, yes, I thought I was calling on you before, but it turns out we have an Alec here. So there's a little confusion between the Alex and the Alec.
Okay.
Now it's your turn, Alex.
I thought so. So my question is, John, I think you've explained that you've talked about some of the benefits of meditating on the 4 powers, the 4 opponent powers, and visualizing and reciting the mantra.
Yeah.
I mean, those benefits may be that we could reduce the strength of some of the negative actions that we may have committed in the past, and we may weaken the sort of a propensity to repeat
yes, exactly.
actions in the future, and we may cultivate the capacity to cultivate a more skillful motivation in the future. And I'm wondering if would you say that just resting the mind, stabilizing the mind, meditating, cultivating insight, just trying to cultivate sort of a state of mental quiescence, could that also have the same beneficial effects of sort of cleaning out some of the negative qualities in the mind that we might not be fully aware of?
Well, so for those people who may not be familiar with the terms that Alex just used, he was talking about two types of meditation. One is mental quiescence, or like a concentration meditation, which you stabilize your attention, and then insight meditation, in which you you cultivate an understanding of the nature of reality to actually oppose different negative forces like hatred and jealousy and the like. And so I think, as I understood Alex's question, is can simply by practicing quiescence, just achieving a calm state of mind, can this overcome some of these difficulties? Is that an accurate portrayal of your question?
Yeah.
Well, it certainly gives us a break, a vacation, because if one actually can develop that kind of stability of attention, then during that period of time, hatred and jealousy and arrogance don't arise in the mind, because the mind is just stabilized on some object of concentration, whether it be light or an image or whatever it is. Okay. But in and of itself, only concentration isn't going to reduce the strength or the roots from where those defilements of anger and jealousy and hatred and attachment, where they arise. In fact, I remember Geshe Landaw saying that it's like a bird, a large bird, when it's on the ground casts a shadow, but when it flies up in the sky, the shadow disappears. And the bird might think, oh, I got rid of my shadow. But as soon as it returns back to the earth, then the shadow reappears, because it never really got rid of it, right? Well, similarly, if our practice is limited just to mental quiescence, just to calmness and focus, then we will definitely get a surcease, a vacation from the delusions. But it's only by uprooting their deep causes that we become free from them, that they become weaker and weaker and eventually can disappear. Quiescence itself won't do that. However, having said that, if the quiescence meditation is focusing not just on the breath or on a patch of color or any of the things that it could be focused on, if it is focused on an image which represents the enlightened state. So if we have Shakyamuni Buddha in front of us, or if we approach it from a different angle and we have an image of Jesus in front of us, right? And for us, this isn't just a picture of a being. This is a manifestation of the qualities of loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, skillful means, and all those things. But even though the practice is so largely one of mental stabilization, the fact that we're focusing on a very salutary object, not something just neutral, like the breath or a patch of color or any of the many things that we could be focusing on. Just by doing that, it is bringing some of the qualities of that object into our consciousness, and that does help overcome, and reduce the strength of whatever those defilements were. Does that make sense? Does that distinction make sense?
Your explanation, John, makes sense to me, but I think that there are some people that would say that by simply meditating in a sort of a one-pointed manner, not necessarily on a sort of a positive object of meditation, but simply meditating and clearing and cultivating qualities of awareness and insight, that through simply clearing the mind, that some sort of a qualities
Realization.
in one's own mind that we're not aware of, we gradually become aware of them, and by simply seeing them clearly, that the strength of those potential qualities may become weakened. Like there might be the example of kind of a pool of water that's sort of stirred up and you can't see through, but just simply sitting and stabilizing the mind, gradually those kind of cloudy, obscuring qualities may become settled.
Well, I think what you say is true. In fact, even in this practice, just by being still and quiet for a period of time, we get an experience of spaciousness in which we can dwell and which can have that own very positive effects. But you know what I think, maybe what it is you're referring to, either directly or indirectly, is that there are systems of meditation which on its final stages cultivate the kind of wisdom or experience that you're describing, that just by simply resting the mind in its basic state, right, then the realizations, the enlightened realizations come. You find things like that within practices like Mahamudra and Dzogchen. And so some people feel who haven't really trained in that, who've just heard that, oh, by those practices, you can just sit and do basically nothing and get realizations.
Mm.
They don't really understand that in order to reach that state in which that almost formless form of meditation is going to bring realizations, there's a lot of work that had to be done beforehand.
Yeah.
It doesn't start with that.
Yeah.
Right? And the work that's done beforehand has all of the insight, cultivates all the various types of insight that are mentioned in the kind of path that we've been alluding to here. But it has a special quality that at a certain point, and also relating to the transmission that we receive from our guru, that even a meditation which barely looks like meditation, it barely seems to have the qualities of insight built into it, do actually lead to that experience. But that is, these are very, very high, very profound practices. And if you want to, learn more about them, there are things you can read, but I think it's only by making contact with a teacher who can give you that transference that you can taste the result of that kind of practice.
Yeah.
But it's definitely possible.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask because I thought, sort of, on the other hand, it could be confusing if I had the idea that it's only by reciting a particular mantra that I can, address a certain problem
no.
you may be experiencing. That would also be another way of, could be confusing that way as well.
Yes, I wanted to mention that the practice that we're doing here, when we reach the point of the remedy, okay, the third one of the 4 opponent powers, that there's a whole range of things that we can be doing. And I've just chosen the recitation of the mantra because it's very, very rich. It has within it, the more we, for example, the more we read the life story of Shakyamuni Buddha, the more he becomes a real character. And then by visualizing him and invoking his energy, we're invoking all the elements of the path that made him the Buddha that he was, right? So that's one thing. And also recitation of mantra is something that, of course, Zoom makes it a little bit more difficult, but it is a practice we can do together, and that has a great power to it. But we can invoke these 4 opponent powers and use all kinds of different practices. Mantra, I've just chosen that as the one because it seems to be something that can be helpful, but it's not the be all and end all. There's many practices, some which use mantras, some which don't use mantra, like that. And some which, the remedial practice is something else entirely.
I I appreciate that you shared with us the story of how you heard Lama Yeshe recite this mantra for you many years ago.
Mhm.
And I remember visiting Vajrapani Institute, and you shared this mantra with us there as well. And I experienced that same kind of sincere connection at that time as well.
Thank you. Okay, folks, so now it's time for our break. So we'll come back in an hour. I have 6 minutes after 10, so it must be something like 6 minutes after 1, where the people on the East Coast are, and God knows what time it is in the other parts of the world where the rest of you are. But we'll be starting in just over an hour from now. And if questions occur to you um, during the break time, remember what they are, and we'll have a chance to touch on them. And if there's time and energy, there's a couple of more things that I'd like to share before this course comes to an end. So thank you very much, and I'll see you in 1 hour.